Om Apiyantu Mamangani Vak Pranaschakshuhu Shrotamatra Balamindriyani Cha Sarvani Sarvam Brahma Upanishadam Mahabrahma Nirakuryam Mama Brahma Nirakarora Nirakaranamastva Nirakaranam Meyastu Taratmani Nirataya Upanishatsu Dharmatse Mahishantu Te Mahishantu Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. May our bodies experience great health. May our life force flow unimpeded. May our minds expand in their capacity to know Brahman. For the Upanishads state that all existence is Brahman. Therefore, may we never deny Brahman. May Brahman never deny us. May there be no rejection of Brahman ever by us, we who are dedicated to the realization of the Atman within. May all the divine qualities cited in the Upanishads always reside within us and abide with us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. This morning, for our live streaming satsang, we have gathered to take questions and also to have a class this afternoon at 2:30 Hawaii Standard Time in the afternoon. So we will be speaking on the Shakta Advaita Vada path. There's a non-dualism under the umbrella or under the mantle of Divine Mother Reality, Shakti it's called. The dynamic power of Brahman. And so these questions that I see have come in this morning from some of the viewers and the students are relative to that subject. So, and spiritual life and spiritual topics are our main focus here in SRV. So without any more delay, let's jump right into these questions and see what kind of deep teaching comes out and that we can contemplate later in our day. You know, in Vedanta first it's Shravana, or to hear the truth, Shruti, and then it's Manana, which has to do with the mind, rolling it over and over in the mind. Sometimes they call that Yukti, or reasoning. And then Nididhyasana, to bring it full circle and realize it, and then also bring it into one's life as a fourth stage. Sometimes we call that Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, and another way it's called Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhav. Anubhava means direct spiritual experience. So when you pick up the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, for instance, and you start reading the words of the great master out of there, he's pretty much starting off right there at that level of trying to gain spiritual experience. He figures you've probably already heard the truth, you've reasoned about it, and now you want to try and realize it. So texts, great scriptures of that order really begin at a rather deep and profound level. The practitioner can begin to transform himself into an adept and begin to master the various aspects of spiritual life, which is the purpose for life altogether, according to Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. So question and answer, what we call Atma Vichara, is an important part of that. The first question here on this paper I was handed this morning was, what was the essence of Swamiji's message for the Western householder? Of course, for those who are watching now and for those who may watch in the future who aren't necessarily familiar with Vedanta and are getting into it for the first time or early on, Swamiji is an affectionate term for Vivekananda himself, Swami Vivekananda, who is Sri Ramakrishna's main disciple and one of the 16 direct disciples. And we've actually just finished the 150th centenary year of Swami Vivekananda's appearance here on earth, and with a little bit of overlapping going to the 151st year, there are still going on having these concluding ceremonies. We were watching some of them on the live streaming yesterday in India at the Belar Mat and so forth. So Swamiji here refers to Swami Vivekananda. So the essence of his teachings, I would say it's probably, if you're talking about essence, the same for monk and householder, for everyone. And that's, of course, the bringing out the divinity of mankind. Sometimes they have a metaphor. We use a metaphor to teach that. Take a crystal, for instance, and then take a hammer and smash it into bits. And you'll find that everything is widespread. You see the crystal's gone, but there's all these little fragments. And these little fragments, you find out, are exactly like the whole. Each one of them has within it the characteristics that were in the crystal. So sometimes you hear people are of scattered mind and very indeterminate and have lost their faith and so forth, and basically they think God and man are two separate things, or maybe God doesn't even exist. But as things begin to get a little deeper for the spiritual aspirant, begins to aspire for higher things, then they begin to say, I'm a spark off the fire. And the Upanishads even use that analogy sometimes, being a spark off the fire. But the real implication of a message like mankind is divine and not sinful is this idea of every shard or every fragment of the crystal has within it the characteristics of the crystal itself. So in the Advaitic way of saying, you would conclude then, Siddhanta it's called, you'd make a conclusion that and if you apply it religiously across the board to mankind, that all souls are divine. They have within them, they're not just a fragment of the divinity off of Brahman, but they are divinity itself. They hold all the characteristics of Brahman within them. So that's a very profound teaching and very non-dual. And it takes, of course, realization. Once I was told by one of the teachers that you're not divine until you realize you're divine, echoing Swami Vivekananda's words. So it's a matter of making it so with your mind. It is. There's another analogy where if you throw a magnet into the middle of a bunch of iron filings, then all of a sudden all the iron filings are clapped together, you see, around the magnet. It's all one. So you might say that's sort of in a reverse form. You started out one with a crystal, and Maya, the hammer, split you apart into fragments. And then you had to realize that in this state of division that really you had everything inside of you, even if the crystal were not there anymore. So if God doesn't seem to be there anymore to mankind, has to realize that divinity within himself. But in the case of the iron filings, coming back to the magnet, then you see that this is the gathering power of the mind to realize itself, the divinity in itself, but also the divinity in every other being. So if you talk about the essence of Swami Vivekananda's message, then whether it be for householder or for monk, if you're talking about essence again, because there are specific teachings for monks and specific teachings for householders, no doubt, but the essence, if you're talking about that, then it's that, number one, that this divinity is, mankind is divine by very nature. That's called Atman in our tradition. And second, that you have to realize it, and realize it in every other being too. All those other shards, all those other iron filings, all those other human bodies, body-mind mechanisms out there also have the same divinity as you. So we were hearing that repeated many times yesterday as we watched the centenary proceedings there, winding up at the Belar Mat on the live streaming. Because Thursday was Swami Vivekananda's birthday, you see, so this week has been very profound in that regard. So if you took this question a little bit deeper, then, and you did specifically say what is the general teaching for the Western householder, then Swamiji had different things he would say. He would say, do your Shiva puja every day. So you're fulfilling the puja, the idea of worship in the household, because worship keeps the household together. The household that is devoid of dharma is full of karma, as the saying goes. Household that is devoid of dharma is full of karma. So if you're practicing dharma all the time in the household with husband and wife and children, then you find out that karma stays far away, that it gets, the karma that rises, called kriyamani karma, gets dispelled on the spot day to day and doesn't rise up anymore to cause problems in the household, disagreements and disobedience and untoward thought and errant thought and so forth. But if the dharma is not kept constant day to day, that is, study of scripture together, meditation together, doing the Shiva pujas I just mentioned together, then the household becomes very split apart and full of arguments and problems, as you see many households of the day, especially here in the West. We know what happens to them. So that might be one of the more general messages to the householder devotees from Swami Vivekananda. Basically, you want to keep the Dharma going on in the household day to day without any break. And even sometimes if it feels like, thank you, sometimes if it feels like that nothing is happening by the exercise of the Dharma, that is very spiritual practice you do, you still maintain them, because it's not like one of these immediate results that you get from other things in the world. If you keep at it, then it shows itself up after a period of time. The karma comes back, good karma comes back at a length of time. So I would say that the teachings to the Dharmic householder then are fairly clear, but the overall message as far as the essence goes is that this divinity exists in mankind. It must be realized and it must be seen in all beings. That would be a practice that both monk and householder would do as far as the essential message goes. Seeing Brahman everywhere, seeing God everywhere is what it's called. And another question that was just handed to me here that's in correlation with this. Did Swamiji make a distinction between Western and Eastern householders? I don't think Swamiji made distinctions at all, basically. I mean, if he had his druthers, as they say, he would want to see one Atman in all and treat them all the same as far as spiritual practices go. The one distinction he might make in people is if he were his student or not. We know that's true, that if you were a student, he was very strict with you and wanted you to realize the goal, realization of the Atman. And if you weren't a student, then he might as well have been your playmate. He was happy and laughing and encouraging and everything. Not that he wasn't that way to his devotees or his disciples, but with his disciples there was that distinction. If you've taken the commitment to the spiritual path, then you must work very hard. It was like the last message I heard from my teacher before he passed from the body was, if your ideal is high, then your effort must be tremendous, I think is how he put it. If your ideal is high, then your effort must be tremendous. If your ideal is not so high, then you can probably reach it with very little effort. But higher ideals demand higher intensity. And we know the teaching around that is to clarify your mind first and then intensify your sadhana. Don't try and intensify an unclear mind. Your teachers will be telling you this if they're good teachers, and you check in with them before you launch into spiritual life you need a guide in that territory. So distinctions between Western and Eastern householders would only be there as a matter of necessity or location. If he's in the West and he has Western disciples here, then he is treating them according to the standard that they're used to in the West. But if all of a sudden the Western disciples ended up in India, like Sister Vedanta and a few of them did, then they would see Swamiji in a whole different light. They would see him in his own territory, in his own atmosphere. And then he wouldn't be so formal anymore and wearing frock and might even be in a loincloth or something and rolling around near a Duni fire chanting the Lord's name, which you don't find going on very often in the West, at least not back in 1893 when he was here. So overall, no, distinctions would go away. That would be the point. You try and make distinctions go away, differences, separations, those kinds of things. You want to, again, bring everyone together like iron filings around that magnet for the concrescence of humanity, for the amelioration of humanity, the betterment, so that they begin to see the oneness between each other and start to have the divine relation based again on this essence of Swamiji's teaching, that divinity is in everyone, is in everything really, because the teaching about the Atman, all-pervasive Atman, it's not like the individual self or the ego self. It's the all-pervasive self we're talking about. If self is a word to use there, you can use other words, but that's why we have Sanskrit words like Atman. But basically it's the same in everyone and everything, in quality and quantity. It doesn't change. It's only the mechanism that changes, and that change then can be seen by the difference between the Atman in a dog, the Atman in a stone, or the Atman in a human being. Of course, the mechanism, the three mechanisms, one is much more refined, much more able to recognize and realize the Atman, but it's the same everywhere and in everything. It's the subtle substratum or backdrop to everything that everyone overlooks, and basically they overlook it because of name and form, time and space, and causality. Those five things are called Maya when you put them together, especially when you put them under the heading of covering and distorting power. You've got 7 things there really that cover reality. Just by the very nature of their appearance, they cover reality, which is formless. So those distinctions then are causing form and name and time and space to be more and more real, seem more and more real. The space between you and I seems more real, and our separate names make Maya more real, and different conditions of our mind, the gunas, seem to make Maya more real. So we want to cut out those distinctions, slim them down, pull away the curtains, and begin to see this one Atman in everything. So there's why you do practices like in the household and so forth, and in the monastery, to practice the Dharma, hear the teachings, realize the teachings, and bring them full circle into your life, whether it's a monastic life or a householder life. So those 2 questions got us started nicely and warmed us up to the topic. Now, this next question has to do with waking and dreaming, waking and sleeping. The question is, Taoism and Buddhism have sophisticated teachings and practices such as lucid dreaming that guide the spiritual aspirant to utilize the cycle of sleep as part of sadhana. As Vedantists, how are we best to make use of the valuable hours of sleep and deep sleep cycles in order to awaken? It means awaken spiritually. Well, I would say the first teaching around that as Vedantists is rest well. Use your sleep to rest. That's practical. You can't realize the Atman, as we were just talking about, if you're not well rested nor well fed. That is, in moderation, of course. Krishna says in the Gita, yoga is not for that one who sleeps too much or or sleeps too little, or eats too much or eats too little. So make sure that according to capacity and moderation, that you keep the body, mind, prana composite, the psychophysical being, sometimes we call it in Vedanta, well rested and well nourished, so that it can rise to the challenge of realizing the Atman, which takes a lot of energy, not so much outer energy, although that will be there, but a lot of energy inwardly and a lot of stamina inwardly. Patience, or you might say lack of patience, can rob you of a lot of energy, as do a lot of other negative elements in life. They rob you of your energy. The energy really comes from inside of you, from prana and from deeper, from Shakti. So if you're blocking the avenues to Shakti flowing or prana flowing, as the case may be on different levels, then you're going to lose your energy, and then you won't be able to live a successful spiritual life, or a dharmic life, or a divine life, or even a transcendent life, which is possible too. So if it's true that Father's mansion has many chambers, then we want to go into all those chambers, and we want to open those doors and throw open the windows, draw back the curtains, and let the light flow in, and let this air of heights flow in, this Advaitic air of heights, and throw light on the whole situation, inwardly and outwardly, and recognize where that light comes from a source, from a definite source. So that's the first thing I would say. Yes, Vedanta's using the waking, dreaming, deep sleep scenario, which make sure that you use it for resting well. Now, as far as the more esoteric teachings, I would say, as Vedantists, you would use the valuable hours of deep sleep and waking and dreaming to first acknowledge that those are the three states of your consciousness. This is the unique turn that Vedanta would have on the teaching. It was really Gaudapada's teaching. He brought it out fairly early on, although it was there in the tradition all along, but he rather emphasized it. Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti, it was called, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states. And he pointed those out as being the three states of your consciousness. So first, just recognize that you have three states of consciousness. Second, correlate it with the three bodies, that now you have three bodies, a waking body, a dreaming body, and a deep sleep body. And these little bits of knowledge are already freeing. See, they're already placing you over and above and deeper than the run of thinking that most people have. See, people, who hear these teachings and respond to them must have heard them before, so they're deepening them in each lifetime. But people who hear them and don't respond to them, it might as well be Greek to them, as the saying goes. So, or Sanskrit, we could say in this atmosphere. You don't know what it means yet. So to hear that waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states are three states of your consciousness that you shift through. Consciousness would also tell you that consciousness can move through these three states, or does move. That would, of course, be relative consciousness. And also that it moves through your three bodies, that you have three bodies, a body in each of those states. So your dream body tonight is something then to meditate on or to study, and that will help render your dreaming state more lucid, to know that, to bring your consciousness into it, you see, rather than just to stay distant from your dreams and say, oh, I had a dream, you see, oh, I remember it, oh, I'm forgetting it, you see, it's disappearing, and then they just, like waking experiences, your dream experiences just go somewhere, and they don't ever make any effect on you. There's no transforming power in them. Isn't it? Both the waking experiences you have and the dreaming experiences you have, where did they go? See? So are we just to let them pass and put them in some repository somewhere that we don't know about, so we're not extracting any essence from them? Or in the waking state, should we be going around and extracting essence from each of our experiences? From our negative experiences as well as our positive experiences, because both of them are very valuable to us. So I would say those two teachings come forward. A third way, since we're speaking in terms of threes anyway, most of the time, is to connect your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep state with your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep bodies to the A, U, and M of the word, Om. Then you have rather a source for the teaching. Basically, that sound emanation, Shabda Brahman or Nada Brahman, they call it, or Om, is emanating all the time with its two apertures, in and out. From this eye, you see, third eye. And souls are going into manifestation and coming out of manifestation to non-manifestation all the time. We call that birth, life, and death here in this planet, in this realm of existence. But it's actually not creation, preservation, and destruction at all. It's just a cycling of non-manifestation to manifestation and back, after a little play or sport, then back to an unmanifested state, and that's going on continually. And those three levels of consciousness then become very key for you in order to recognize that that's what's happening to souls. That is, waking would be manifestation, and dreaming would be play, and then deep sleep would be non-manifestation, wouldn't it? So you draw another three correlations between those teachings. And all of a sudden, now you've brought more light into the situation of your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep life. There's more meaning to them. There's more connection to them. And there's a fourth state now you hear about called Turiya. And you're gathering more information about yourself and your movement in these three states of consciousness, to find out all of a sudden that consciousness at an ultimate state never moves. Brahman doesn't move. Brahman doesn't think. Atman never comes and goes, never thinks, but always knows, as the poem says. Atman, that is Brahman, that indivisible self, never moves, never comes and never goes, never thinks, because it's beyond the movement of thought too. It always knows. It's always in knowledge of itself. So that's this Turiya state that it means in Sanskrit the fourth. So they didn't want to burden it down or burden you down with any kind of denominational name or some sort of religious appellation. They just said, just call it the fourth, and know that when consciousness is beyond the three modes of waking, dream, and deep sleep, and it's abandoned its bodies that are associated with the waking body, the dreaming body, and the deep sleep body, that it rests in the fourth state, like an eagle in its nest, the Upanishads say. Of course, that could also apply to deep sleep. It's also resting in its nest there. But that's the unmanifested nature nest, you see. When it comes to Turiya, it gets outside of nature in its manifested and unmanifested form and rests in its essence. That's different, you see. And that's where bliss will come. You can come out of deep sleep feeling very refreshed, no doubt, because you were close to that fourth state. But when you come out of Turiya, and you've been in Turiya consciously, which will happen when you know about Turiya, then you come out with bliss. And so that's another subtle distinction. You don't hear that taught very often, but that's why bliss is impressed upon their features, and it's in their actions, these seers, these luminaries and so forth. They're always contented, peaceful, extremely happy, or just outright blissful. So I would say some of these teachings on waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti, and Turiya, the fourth state, are the elucidating touch to Vedanta, the way they would describe it. I think what would be absent in the Vedanta that they don't consider very important is that you must become a good dreamer. The emphasis is more on, oh dreamer, awake, awake, you must. So a dreamer, a dream suggests that there's a dreamer having the dream. So they say, "O dreamer, awake," in one of the songs. "O dreamer, awake." So that's really the emphasis in the Vedanta's teaching on waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, that those are states of your consciousness associated with three bodies. But Turiya, Brahman, Atman, doesn't have a body. It's in every body. It's all pervasive. It's everywhere. So when you abandon your body, then you get free. You see, a body is a limitation. So you have limitations in the waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states that you can't see through. Deep sleep, as I said, might be very peaceful, and you get a lot of reflection from it, and you wake up feeling refreshed and all that, but you don't know what happened to you there. In samadhi, in nirvana, in the turiya state, you're fully conscious of yourself as light, as sound. That's why this word Om, A-U-M, and Turiya, is very, and Shvara they call it, is very important to know, to connect it to the word, so that you become conscious that the word is in you. And where else would it be? Because you begin to hear it in you. You hear it at the navel center, you hear it at the heart center and throat, and you hear it like a raging ocean, you see, here at the higher centers before the hailstone dissolves into that ocean. And all bodies go away. So there again is that idea of immersion and absorption. States of consciousness at a very deep and profound level. So a good question, and it brings us into that teaching of Gaudapada around his Karika on the Mandukya Upanishad that opens up so many wonderful teachings to us on waking, dreaming, and deep sleep in the Vedantic way of thinking about it. So those points I'd mention here in the short amount of time we have, but also that lucid dreaming is not probably going to be the real point in Vedanta. To wake up from all dreams is going to be the point, because it's, as Vivekananda said, it's ridiculous to think that Atman never dreams. Atman never comes and goes, never thinks, always knows. Well, isn't thinking dreaming? So here we are today having a daydream, and we catch ourselves. Oh, I was thinking, I was daydreaming somewhere. I went away from the waking state, and I was, even when my eyes are open here in the waking state, I was in a dream state. So the mind's casting about with names and forms and playing and imagining and fantasizing and desiring and dreaming. All of those things in Vedanta suggest Maya, suggest playing with name and form, suggest moving away from your nameless, formless nature. And the whole art of spirituality is staying in your nameless, formless nature, even when you've taken a form and a name. And that's Jivan Mukta, that's living liberated condition. So we would apply the teaching more towards that in Vedanta. Now, in the remaining time, we have a three-part question here. It has to do with our mantra retreat that we just gave. It was called Mantra Tapas, where we all did mantra austerity and took a whole bunch of teachings on the mantra from some visuals and charts that I had created. And this question and a few other questions also since then have come up. This one says, in the mantra retreat we had recently, you said that when the mind is not concentrated, that the various aspects of the wisdom particle are scattered, so to speak, and that when the mind concentrates, they come together. Does this apply even when we are concentrated on mundane tasks or only in meditation? Well, the actual wisdom particles themselves get scattered, not just their elements. I think the elements inside the wisdom particle are always intact. So the idea is that the wisdom particles as a stream get scattered. A person who loses their attention span or can't keep an attention span has a hard time concentrating, can't meditate, can't even do the discipline of taking the mind off an object, pratyahara, fifth limb of yoga type of level. That person has their wisdom particles scattered. It's scattered mind, yoga. calls it. Father of Yoga, Patanjali, says it's kshipta or vikshipta. It's scattered mind. And so there's far-flung mind and scattered mind, and then there's an attempt to begin to gather, and then there's a gathering force, and then there's a completely gathered and a one-pointed state. And there are sine waves for each of those, too, that are very interesting. Erratic mind would be this sine wave, and balanced mind would be just a flat line. And then Nirodha mind would be a little line, a space, another line, and then a space, because the mind is actually leaving the world and going into the beatific vision kind of state, and then coming back to the world. That's called samadhi. So there's even a sine wave that can describe that. So the idea about scattered mind, as far as the teaching on the wisdom particle goes, is that those particles, like iron filings, have become far-flung, and there's no center to draw them back. In other words, the Atman has been forgotten. The self, the God, if you wish, or Brahman, light, divine sound, everything has been forgotten, and so there's nothing to attract it back to its source and to its center again. In physical terms, you get the Big Bang, everything, the Big Bang we talk about, and then everything gets scattered as far as bits of matter and planets and so forth, and spreads out forever. But that's evolution, as it were. But what about involution? Will it all come back and solidify again? Will it all come back to a source? And so that's why we have to bring mind into the equation, because mind can and did scatter the worlds, and they can bring them back inside of itself. They will realize that all the worlds came out of them, that the Big Bang is inside the mind as a concept, isn't it? It's a thought we had. And besides, splitting an atom is one thing, but splitting an atom of wisdom is an entirely different thing. You get an amazing implosion from splitting the wisdom of atom, and that will satisfy you in ways that the world cannot. Like Swami Vivekananda says, lower knowledge will satisfy only for a time, see, but spiritual knowledge satisfies for forever. So when you get a hold of the wisdom particles, by the power of concentration, you bring them all back together, and they're a stream of consciousness then, like pouring oil from one beaker to another. Taila Dara Dan, they call it. No splash, just a perfect arc from one beaker to the other. That's, your mind is one beaker, you see, and then Brahman, reality, is another beaker, and your attention just pouring everything right into there. So that's the best meditation. Taila Dara Jan meditation is one-pointed meditation. So in order for that to happen, the wisdom particles all have to be together and in a stream. Otherwise, if they're scattered, it's not going to make for a very good process. See, it's like mustard seeds blown out of a package, they say. How are you going to get them back in the wind? See, they're so tiny and they're all over the grasses. You might be able to get a few in there, see. But so that has to do then with this question. But then to get more specific about it, now that I've clarified the idea of the wisdom particles getting far flung in a mind that isn't concentrated, no magnet, so the filings just go where they may, you see. Then the questioner says, when we are concentrated on mundane tasks or only in meditation? I would say all the time. Mundane tasks aren't mundane, of course, when you're fully concentrated. If a task has become mundane, of course you can give it a label like that, but it might suggest that you're going to do it haphazardly. See? And that's not good, as far as Krishna says in the Gita. Any actions done in tamas or in rajas accrue to karma. So tamas is slothfulness, rajas is restlessness. So if you go to do your acts with a slothful mind or with a restless mind, then there's going to be a kickback from that act or from that series of actions. That's karma coming back on you. It'll get stored up and come back at some time, if not right away. Usually If you're an advanced aspirant, it'll come back right away. But if you're an advanced aspirant, you probably should have had control over tamas and rajas already. So you're doing your acts in sattva. Sattva is the third of those gunas, or modes of nature. So you want to do every act as far as you can in a balanced mind. Therefore, it doesn't matter whether it's an important act, so-called, or a mundane act. You want to do it all in concentration. So yes, the wisdom particles are going to have to be all gathered back at all times until you have a habit of keeping them together, till they stay together on their own. There's even no effort to it. You just prefer to be in that state because it's so much more blissful, so much more peaceful, so much more effective. And the opposite is so much more confusing and so much more non-economical. So your energy is squandered and spent in places you don't want it. So gathering is very important like that. The second part to this question goes on, and how does this apply, that is the wisdom particle and its gathering, to those qualities such as vijnana, samanya, settling wisdom, and guru bhakti? Because those are all parts of the wisdom particle. You see, if you took a particle or an atom of wisdom apart and looked in it, you'd see all these elements in it that are in seed form that when they get expressed, when they enter the mind, brain, body, life quotient, then in order, if you're able to or adept at expressing what's in the wisdom particle, then you get these marvelous inventions, you get these marvelous turns of thought, you get these scriptures, you get ingenious ways of helping beings, serving God and mankind and so forth. All of these things become possible when your wisdom particles are concentrated and put in a stream on any given thing. And that's really the secret to samyama. The word that's mentioned here is, samyama is a combination of concentration, meditation, and samadhi. 6th, 7th, 8th limb of yoga. So that would be like samanya vijnana. It would be this total congregation of all your wisdom particles in a natural way, and you're able to then sort of just like a stream of light put here and here, like a whip, you see, and make every little thing clear, and make it offer up its essence, see, so that appearances and misconceptions don't happen around anything, even right on down to the physical object. So, such things as samanya vijnana, samyama, I was saying, and settling wisdom, and guru bhakti, even your devotion then is all of a sudden brought together into a very fine point. There's Sri Ramakrishna used to say, bring the mind together to a very fine point, like a goad, and then use it to penetrate Maya, penetrate through the curtain of Maya. And that would be this power of concentration, focus, and then it would have the effect of settling wisdom. It's almost a precognition, so like a settled conclusion before the fact. See, not premonition style so much, but just that you've come to expect that everything will reveal itself to you by simply putting your mind's attention on it. That's how adept it can become, how spontaneous it can become, how natural it become. We see that in the greatest beings. Anywhere they go, they immediately suss out situations, relationships, people, animals, bird songs, whatever the case may be, you see, and are in a natural relationship with that. And that's based on this focus of the wisdom particles into a stream and everything that's contained in them. And the final part of this question, I would also like to understand better what is meant by the pervading quality and the projecting power of what you call the cell wall of the Jnanamatra. Jnanamatra means wisdom particle. we're talking about now. So the idea here is that the cell wall makes the wisdom particle impervious to any kind of foreign penetration, like, say, distraction. A person who's once learned the art of concentration, distraction will be a thing of the past to them. In other words, distraction will become looking for that being, but the cell wall is so strong and so resilient that it'll just bounce away. So you have, again, this natural settled wisdom, and you can focus, and whatever happens doesn't deter you at all from your purpose, from your focus. There was a story about Swami Vivekananda that's rather funny, because evidently he went through the Old West. The Old West, as old as it was, in around 1890s, and met some good old cowboys, and was in a room with some of these cowboys with hats and guns and so forth. And they, of course, seeing him in an orange robe and a turban or whatever he was wearing at the time, thought him rather an odd duck. So they were going to test him, so they fired off a pistol behind his back. You see, one of them got behind him and fired off a pistol. And Swamiji didn't jump or didn't react at all, just stayed completely focused. Well, that would be an example of even a gunshot. You see, it wouldn't distract you. Your cell wall is so resilient, so strong, so healthy, and so impervious to penetration that nothing can deter you from what you're concentrating on. And it's not a matter of impracticality. It's like they say, finish your sentence, and they go, "What was that noise?" You see, "Who shot that gun?" And then laugh about it. So it doesn't make you, too rigid or anything. But it's just impossible to break the concentration of a soul like that, and pay it forward to a more beneficial practice, say like studying a scripture. What to speak of just having a conversation with a cowboy. Think about studying a scripture like the Bhagavad Gita or something, and things going on all around you, noises. I say basically back to the question, what Swamiji's teaching to the Western householder, right? So he has to pick up the scripture in the morning, and maybe breakfast is being prepared, you see, and noises and children running through or whatever, but he's shut everything out. See, this is his hour to study the scripture. He'll go to breakfast when breakfast is ready, not until. He's not going to be having breakfast while he's reading the scripture. You see, having breakfast somewhere back in his mind at the same time he's studying the scripture. No, the two don't mix. Oil and water don't mix, see. So he's got his concentration where it should be, for the time it should be there, and nothing's going to deter him. And I can end with a story about that. Sri Ramakrishna told a rather humorous story about the wife of the Hindu householder who serves her husband perfectly all day, and serves his in-laws when they come over, and serves his friends when they come over, probably his friends' in-laws too. Whoever comes over to the house, she's a perfect servant all day until sundown, you see. Then she goes for her bath. And Ramakrishna said then, when she goes for her bath, nobody can call her back. That's her time, you see. In other words, you could call up the hall, the house is on fire, and she said, "You'll put it out." You see, I'm in my bath, nothing can interrupt her bath. So he's talking about that superlative concentration of a person who has gathered all the particles of their mind, we call them jnana matras, wisdom particles, into a package, and cause it to flow, see, towards whatever it wants in perfect concentration. The benefit being that it will extract the essence out of whatever it puts its mind on. It will even penetrate through Maya and see God face to face if it so desires. And also impervious to distraction. You see, its cell wall has the pervading quality and the projecting power. It also has the quality of protecting power in it. So these are all parts of the cell wall that make it impervious to any kind of intrusion, the subject is deep and it can be talked about at length, so come to class, or you can look at our Jnana Matra series of classes on the YouTube now, SRV Associations, because that class has been posted. We gave a series of classes on that.
Wisdom particle.
Yeah, it's called the wisdom particle. Jnana Matra in Sanskrit. Jnana is wisdom. Matra means a particle. So that's the subtitle. Probably the book, which is just finished actually, will be coming out, is called The Wisdom Particle, or Jnana Matra in Sanskrit. So that's a very profound subject, and may all of yours gather. If they're not already gathered, may they all gather soon and confer upon you the full power of your consciousness, because there's an abundance of that subtle power called Shakti there within every being. And of course, realization of the Atman, how we started out. Swamiji's message today is the point of life. All of that connects, and all these questions have connected nicely today. I thank you for sending them in. And now we will move on towards our afternoon live streaming class today on the Shakti Advaita Bada at 2:30 Hawaii Standard Time. And we will return again next week at this time for our live satsang. Thank you for being present, and aloha and namaste.